the Duchess of Duplicity is out of control.
Meghan gave them 2 hours. 2 hours of photos and mingling. Then she left.
Meghan Markle's $3,000 a head women's retreat in Sydney has failed to sell out.
The women who remortgaged their enthusiasm to spend a weekend with the Duchess of Sussex were left at the Intercontinental to enjoy a Duchess-free evening.
Meghan Markle's women's retreat has officially wrapped, and people are saying it turned out nothing like they expected. The event was promoted as a high-end, exclusive weekend with Meghan herself. The idea sounded simple but powerful. Something personal, something close, something real.
She is coining it in from these last few days in Australia. I can't understand the people who have paid $3,000 to listen to a waffle, a load of word salad, and then get some photos.
Attendees reportedly paid up to about 3,200 Australian dollars for what was described as a once-in-a-lifetime experience. A full weekend of wellness, connection, and actual time with the Duchess of Sussex. But when everything unfolded, the reality told a very different story. Meghan Markle showed up, but only for a short window. We're talking roughly 2 hours total.
2 hours of photos and mingling. Then she left and drove to Alliance Stadium with Harry and was photographed in the stands sipping wine while 300 women sat in a hotel conference room in Coogee wondering where their Duchess went.
In that time, there was some conversation, a few photos, and a Q&A session, and then just like that, she was gone. For many attendees, that became the main issue, because this wasn't advertised as a quick appearance or a simple meet and greet.
To the surprise of absolutely no one, she made it all about herself.
It was presented as a full weekend experience centered around Meghan. Instead, once her segment wrapped up, reports say she left the venue completely. And where did she go next? Straight to a rugby match with Prince Harry. Photos and reports show that not long after the retreat appearance, Meghan was spotted at a New South Wales Waratahs game, sitting with Harry in the stands.
This woman is desperate for money and is prepared to do pretty much anything to get it. I mean, this is the last resort of the D-list celebrity.
So while guests were still at the luxury hotel in Sydney, continuing the wellness weekend without her, the main figure they came to see had already moved on to something else entirely. That sharp contrast is what really got people talking online. Because when you look at it closely, one question keeps coming up. What were people actually paying for?
Women paid up to 3,200 Australian dollars for the experience. They flew from around the world. They were physically patted down by security just to walk through the hotel door? What?
Was this meant to be a full immersive retreat with Meghan at the center? Or just a scheduled appearance that was presented as something much bigger? Some attendees mentioned tight security at the venue, with detailed screening before entry. Others pointed out that the expectations set by the branding didn't quite match what happened. The promise was a full weekend.
They stayed in this place, right? $4,500 a night. And by the way, they're on a humanitarian trip. They're keeping it real. Harry and Meghan, super down to earth, staying in an accommodation which costs nearly $5,000 a night.
But the main moment was over in less than 2 hours. And that's where the criticism really starts to build. For many, it doesn't feel like a simple timing issue. It feels like a gap between what was promised and what was delivered. A luxury wellness retreat built around one of the most talked about women in the world, where she appears briefly, speaks, takes photos, and then leaves before the weekend even really begins.
Why are you going to pay thousands of dollars if you're down there in Australia or if you're traveling to listen to someone whose businesses have all crashed and burned? You're going to take a life and career advice from a woman who everything she touches turns to crap.
So a full weekend retreat, but Meghan only shows up for a short moment? Meanwhile, everything else kept going. Yoga sessions, workshops, group activities, all still on schedule, just without her there. The whole itinerary was built around connection, growth, and shared experiences, but the one person many guests came to see was suddenly missing from most of it.
Security was so intense that attendees were physically searched before being allowed into the venue. Photos from the entrance show women standing with their arms extended while security personnel ran hands over their clothing.
And that gap between what people expected and what actually happened is exactly what turned this quiet wellness event into a much bigger online conversation. Now, to some people, it's starting to look more like a polished PR moment than a true immersive retreat. Because no matter how you look at it, whether it was planned this way, misunderstood, or simply presented differently, one thing stands out. The experience many women paid thousands for didn't quite match the image that was being sold. Then there's the security, which quickly became one of the biggest talking points, and not in a low-key way.
For a wellness retreat at a beach hotel in Kogi, because apparently inner peace requires a full-body pat-down.
According to attendee stories and podcast discussions, the security felt extremely intense for something marketed as a calm, wellness-focused weekend. Guests reportedly went through strict checks just to get in, with some even describing full pat-down searches before entering. This wasn't a simple check-in. It felt closer to airport-level screening at a private hotel event. And that raises an obvious question. Why was it this serious?
Can't get on television anymore, so they start selling themselves. It's classic. They start selling access to themselves.
For an event held inside a luxury hotel, some attendees were caught off guard by how controlled everything felt. There were reports of guests being asked to stand still with their arms out while security checked them before entry. For some, that created a strange vibe.
At this wellness summit, Marcus Anderson was he's Harry's sort of shadowy figure best friend in the background.
A retreat meant to feel peaceful and open, but starting with a very tight and controlled process. Naturally, this sparked even more discussion online about the level of security surrounding Meghan Markle.
Apparently, when Harry walked into the room, there was lots of gushing about how handsome Harry is and all this rubbish. And then Harry apparently looked very uncomfortable when Meghan started speaking about Marcus and ran out the room and left and didn't stay. Now, I think that's very strange.
Some people questioned if it was necessary for a short wellness gathering, while others pointed out that with her global status, high security might just be standard. Still, for people actually attending, it reportedly felt more restrictive than expected for an event focused on openness and connection.
And I think it's to do with the Soho House chain down in Australia, sort of testing the waters for that.
Right.
And it's interesting that Meghan wants Marcus there with her on this excursion down under.
Inside the event, Meghan's segment was centered around what she described as real woman-to-woman conversations, aiming to create a more personal and honest connection with the audience. The idea sounded simple: less distance, more real talk about life, pressure, and personal experiences.
Isn't he known as Meghan's second husband?
He is. And he attended this wellness event with Meghan.
But in reality, everything was still very structured. Her appearance lasted around 2 hours, including a Q and A session, brief interactions, and photo moments. It was presented as a major highlight, but in practice, it felt more like a scheduled appearance inside a much bigger program.
Multiple people spotted Marcus Anderson, Meghan's longtime friend and personal fixer, lurking nearby, which tells you everything about whether this was a spontaneous act of compassion or a scheduled content opportunity.
And that disconnect is exactly what people are starting to question now. Because when you put a message of healing, openness, and emotional connection next to a short, tightly controlled appearance inside a heavily secured space, the contrast is hard to miss. It also feeds into a much bigger conversation about the modern wellness industry.
There are reports that someone in the sausages camp tipped off Channel 9 about their location in advance, so the cameras would already be rolling when they arrived. This sounds like Meghan.
Events like this sit right at the intersection of celebrity influence, luxury branding, and personal growth. And the moment someone like Meghan steps into that space, everything levels up.
2 hours! And then she left with Harry, who, by the way, showed up at a women-only event, which drew its own wave of criticism.
The attention, the price, and especially the expectations. So the question people keep asking is simple. Is this really about healing and genuine connection, or has it turned into something else? Because one thing is clear. This isn't just a small wellness retreat anymore. It's a high-end, celebrity-driven experience operating in a very specific space where access, image, and exclusivity can feel just as important as the actual content of the event itself. And within that setup, every little detail starts to matter more than usual.
If I wanted to attend a women-only event, I wouldn't be happy to see a man present, and I wouldn't care who his father is. Although if you see Harry in this posture, You see that the women-only thing, I don't know, I'm not going to elaborate.
From how security is handled to how long someone actually shows up and speaks, it all shapes how the entire experience is seen. There's also another detail that's been making rounds: whether the event was actually sold out or not. Official messaging suggested strong demand, making it sound like a fully booked high-demand weekend. But multiple online discussions and reports have hinted that the retreat may not have been completely sold out in the way it was presented. Still, Meghan Markle and the branding around the event continued to frame it as a packed, in-demand experience. And that's where the questions start coming in again. If spots were still open, why present it as sold out? And more importantly, where does marketing end and reality begin in events like this?
Meghan wearing pantyhose in Australia after publicly complaining that being forced to wear them as a royal felt inauthentic.
Another detail that's been circulating involves a journalist who claims she was refunded after buying a ticket. According to the report, she initially signed up like any other attendee, but later she was contacted and given a refund, with her access no longer moving forward. The suggestion was that once her media role became known, it may have influenced that decision.
You became a large public figure. Every public figure has been subjected to negative scrutiny, often very intense and unpleasant. You had the benefit of universally loving and adoring, praise, fawning press for a year.
Online, this sparked even more talk, with some people suggesting that not everyone who wanted to attend was actually allowed in, and that the guest list may have been more selective than it seemed.
And the sausages decided that their publicity tour would not be complete without a visit to the memorial.
If that's true, it adds another layer to how the event may have been managed, not just based on availability, but possibly on who was seen as the right fit for the environment and the overall image connected to Meghan Markle and the retreat. At the retreat, another unexpected name reportedly showed up alongside Meghan Markle: Marcus Anderson. And yes,
My life advice, call me crazy, if you marry a prince and you make it into the royal family, just sit your ass there and eat crumpets and scones, okay? Don't blow it, okay?
that caught a lot of attention. Marcus Anderson is often described as someone closely connected to Meghan's inner circle, a familiar face who seems to appear at many key moments in her world. He's widely known within elite social circles linked to Soho House, a private members network tied to entertainment, fashion, and high-profile industries. In those spaces, Anderson is seen as someone who moves easily between influential groups, often connected to introductions and behind-the-scenes networking.
Meghan is like, oh, was this Catherine's pillow? I'd like to have Catherine's pillow and maybe soak up some of her royal DNA so I can be a verified royal myself.
Over time, he's been viewed as part of the broader circle around Prince Harry and Meghan, someone who shows up where their social and professional worlds overlap. From major public events to more private gatherings, his presence has been consistent enough that people have started to notice. So when he appeared at this retreat too, it naturally sparked conversation. What made things even more interesting were the reactions people described from inside the event itself. During the Q&A session with Meghan, some attendees claimed the atmosphere shifted when the discussion moved toward more personal topics and relationships within close circles. At one point, there were suggestions that Prince Harry seemed slightly uncomfortable during parts of the conversation. Some accounts say he reacted to the tone and may have stepped out briefly before returning later. People watching closely felt that certain topics being discussed sounded a bit too personal for a public setting. Whether that moment was simply misread or meant something deeper, it quickly became part of the bigger story around the event.
Look at her strutting in, just so self-important, just the pomp and the circumstance. They're like, the Duchess of Sussex. And you would think she's, at Westminster Abbey.
Because when you combine Marcus Anderson's presence, the tone of the discussion, and Harry's reported reaction, it created a situation that some people interpreted as revealing more about the inner circle than expected. In that context, Anderson's attendance starts to feel like more than just a casual appearance. It adds to the growing perception that the same close-knit group continues to show up across different settings, social events, private gatherings, and public appearances, moving together as a connected circle. And that's exactly why this moment stood out so much. Not because of one single reaction, but because of how familiar faces keep appearing in key moments, shaping the overall atmosphere around these high-profile events. And then another question starts to come up.
They will spend Saturday doing wellness activities with the speakers who have not been publicly confirmed. They are sharing hotel rooms with the strangers, and the highlight of their $3,200 experience lasted 120 minutes.
Was this really a women's space, as it was originally presented? Because while the retreat was promoted around female empowerment, wellness, and open conversation, the presence of Prince Harry shifted how some attendees viewed the environment. Online commentary picked up on this detail almost instantly. People started asking a simple question.
So they stayed at the Royal Suite at the 5-star St. Regis, in a room described as the only one of its kind, located on the 15th floor of the 17-story hotel. The suite is said to include 3 fully equipped bathrooms, 3 bathrooms, which is nothing compared to the 16 bathrooms in their Montecito mansion.
Why was Harry there at all? For an event presented as a women-focused space built around shared experiences and open conversation, his presence stood out right away. Seeing him alongside Meghan Markle sparked debate about whether the original idea of a women-centered environment was still intact, or if the event had shifted into something more public and mixed.
This is all Meghan Markle ever wanted in life. Meghan Markle, she just wanted to be an influencer with a blog.
From that angle, having such a high-profile male figure, especially someone as globally recognized as Harry, changed the whole vibe for some observers. What was meant to feel intimate and focused on women began to look more like a carefully managed celebrity setting, where the line between private conversation and public moment started to blur.
Meghan turning the Bondi Beach Terror Memorial into a photo opportunity that Australians are calling disaster tourism.
And that shift is exactly what pushed the conversation even further online. At that point, it stopped being just about the retreat itself. It started tapping into a much bigger picture around how people see Meghan Markle in general. Because for many, this felt like part of a pattern they think they've seen before. One comparison that keeps coming up is with Diana, Princess of Wales. Diana is often remembered as someone who showed emotion in a very natural and direct way, without heavy structure or polished presentation. That contrast now shapes how some people view Meghan's public storytelling. It's not always about what's true or not. It's about how it feels to the audience. Diana's story is often seen as raw and unplanned, while Meghan's is sometimes viewed as more structured and media-driven. That difference affects how people react to her statements about being attacked or misunderstood. Another comparison people bring up is the idea of the Fire Festival, and not because the events are the same, but because of the pattern. Fire Festival became known as a symbol of big promises and a reality that didn't fully match.
Duke and Duchess of Dollar. Not sausages, I prefer sausages, but dollar fits. Because even the journalists who have covered this couple for a decade have stopped pretending that trips are about anything other than money.
In situations like this retreat, critics point to similar elements: high prices, strong branding, big expectations, and then an experience that feels smaller or different than what was imagined. Even if the scale is completely different, the feeling people describe follows a similar line: a gap between what was promoted and what was delivered. From there, the conversation moves into something even deeper: how Meghan's public image is interpreted. Some people believe she presents herself as someone who has been misunderstood, targeted, and emotionally affected over time. In that view, repeating those themes becomes part of a recognizable public identity. And that kind of narrative can be powerful. It connects emotionally, it builds sympathy, and it makes people relate to the idea of resilience under pressure. But others see it in a completely different way. From another perspective, it's not strategy at all, it's personal processing. The idea here is that talking about past experiences again and again isn't planned messaging, but a sign of someone still working through things publicly. In that view, it's not about shaping perception.
Compare this to Pamela Anderson, who is doing a similar wellness-style event in Australia at a 2,500-seat theater with tickets starting at $85. She has already sold over 2,000 seats. Meghan cannot feel 300 at 10 times the price.
It's about not being fully past those moments yet. And then there's a middle ground that some people point to, something more strategic, but still consistent. In that interpretation, Meghan's public image is built around clear themes like resilience, healing, empowerment, and overcoming challenges. These ideas show up again and again across interviews and appearances. Within that pattern, phrases like, "they tried to destroy me," become powerful shorthand, not just statements, but symbols of a bigger story about pushing through and starting over. The reason this turns controversial isn't really about the message, it's about how often people hear it. For critics, it comes down to pattern recognition. When the same emotional tone shows up again and again, in interviews, speeches, and events like this retreat, it can start to feel less like a natural moment and more like something carefully repeated. Over time, that repetition shifts how people see it. What once felt open and personal can, for some viewers, start to feel more structured, almost like a public script instead of a raw, in-the-moment expression. And that tension between what feels real and what feels repeated is what keeps the debate going. It's not just about the words being said, but how often they show up, where they're said, and how they connect to the bigger public image that's been built over time. Now here's the piece that pulls everything together, and it actually changes how the entire retreat looks when you zoom out and stop focusing on just single moments. First, there's the gap between the marketing and the reality. The retreat was promoted as a full, immersive weekend with Meghan Markle at the center, something ongoing, personal, and deeply engaging. The messaging focused on access, closeness, and real connection. But in reality, the biggest highlight people keep talking about was a short 2-hour appearance. That gap isn't small. It's the core issue shaping the entire story. Second, this event clearly fits into what people call the celebrity economy. In this space, value isn't really about time spent. It's about proximity. Guests weren't just paying for activities like yoga or workshops. They were paying to be near a globally known figure. In that system, Meghan isn't just part of the event. Her presence is what gives the event its price and appeal. And once you see it that way, the whole setup starts to look less like pure wellness and more like visibility turned into a product. Third, there's the repeated appearance of the same social circle. Names like Marcus Anderson continue to show up in these environments, often linked to networks like Soho House. This creates a pattern where the same group seems to move together across events, projects, and appearances. It gives the impression of a tightly connected world, where relationships, access, and opportunities are all closely linked. And finally, there's the value question, which is hard to ignore. Guests reportedly spent thousands for a wellness-focused experience, yet the main attraction was limited to a short appearance window. The rest of the weekend carried on without the central figure, which changes how people view what they actually paid for. What was presented as a weekend with Meghan starts to feel more like a scheduled appearance inside a much larger program. Fifth, there's the repetition in how the story is framed. Across different interviews and public appearances, Meghan often comes back to the same core themes: long-term public pressure, emotional strain, and staying strong through it all. The idea of being attacked over many years becomes a key part of how she tells her story. For some people, that creates a clear and consistent identity. But for others, it starts to feel like a fixed narrative that shows up in every major moment. Sixth, there's a clear split in how people interpret everything. One side sees this as a normal celebrity-style event where expectations may have been misunderstood or stretched by marketing. The other side sees something different, a pattern where big promises of exclusivity are paired with very controlled, limited appearances. The facts don't really change, but the way people read them completely depends on what they focus on. And finally, everything circles back to one big question: what was actually being sold here? Because this wasn't just about access to a retreat. It was about access to a person whose presence defined the entire experience. And once that presence becomes limited, scheduled, and tightly controlled, the gap between what people imagined and what they got becomes the real story. At that point, it's no longer just about the retreat itself. It's about how it was presented, how it was priced, and how it was experienced by the people who showed up. And that's where this whole situation lands, somewhere between expectation, branding, and perception, with completely different conclusions depending on who's looking at it. Got something to say about this? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's get into it. If this breakdown made you see things differently, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Tap that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it.